And so let's bring up to this episode and kind of working our way up to the mountaintop here. So we're in the situation where they've got this heist going on where two of them are trying to sneak into the base and the others are going to have some support roles. And this sort of naturally happens. Like Din doesn't they don't have like a big map and a big plan that they write down. And he doesn't assign tasks to people and they're not communicating very clearly. It's like, okay, you two are going to go roughly do this part of the job, go figure it out. You're going to do this other part of the job, go figure it out. I'm going to do this part of the job, even though it's going to cause me to break some of my own rules. I got to take my helmet off and put on this stupid uniform and go drive the truck with this guy that I don't trust. Din Djarin himself, the Mandalorian himself, kind of takes on some risks and breaks some own rules because the mission's important to him, right? And so he's already seeing the team is empowered. He's already seeing that the team is able to just go independently, be individual contributors and be aligned with the mission, because he's gotten to that point. But now they're kind of to the crux of the mission, the dangerous, hard part of it. And our hero is in the truck with the Mayfeld character, who has been shanghaied into this out of prison and is a known sort of double-crossing bandit, Imperial sharpshooter, like not a guy very high character so far as we've seen him. And as things do in these stories, right, things don't go perfectly well. It's reasonably successful. They get into the base. They're set up for what they want to accomplish, but they keep having to break their own rules. They keep having to improvise, and it's basically not going very well. So, Drew, what's our mountaintop scene for this episode?
All right. So our mountaintop is kind of the obvious mountaintop in season 2, episode 7 here. This is an awesome episode. They're breaking into the Imperial base, and when they get in there, they have this approach that they're going to go steal some information out of the computer terminal, and they're going to have Mayfeld go and do it because he can log in and look like an Imperial, and Din's going to go in as backup with him. But when he gets in there, Mayfeld runs across a former Imperial officer that was over him named Valen Hess. And so his immediate response is he wants to back out and save his own hide. He's like, I don't think I can go in there. Like, that's going to be taking on too big of a risk. And
that guy's gonna recognize me. I'm gonna get in trouble. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, and even before this, while they're on the way in this armored truck, they're having a conversation between Din and Mayfeld. And Mayfeld basically tries to tell Din that, yeah, I get it. You have, and in different words, but you have your way, I have my way. They're basically the same thing. He's like, everybody's just, in the end, they're going to have to do what's best for themselves. He's basically giving him a hard time over having such a principled approach to everything. And so that's the setup job for us, finding ourselves here, where, of course, we have the Bill Burr character not following following exactly what he said he was going to do, which is save his own hide. Din does the script flip in this situation. He's like, well, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to do it. He's like, well, you're not going to be able to do it because you have to take your helmet off in order to access the terminal. And Din's like, well, that's what I'm going to do then. And so he goes in and he does it, right? He accesses the terminal and he's there. He gets the information back, but then he's getting questioned by this Imperial officer, Valen Hess. As he's getting questioned by him, Din doesn't have a good response when he gets asked what his trooper number is and who he's with and stuff. And so Mayfeld comes in, takes the personal risk, enters the conversation, and he saves Din. He provides like the backstory that he needs to cover him. They get invited over because apparently they did a good job dropping off this transport. And so they're sitting at the table talking. And then what happens? Valen Hess is this, pompous Imperial guy, and so he's talking about how, yeah, we had to sacrifice 5,000 or 10,000 people, but it was all in purpose of the system, and
it was glorious. Yeah, we murdered all those people, but it was glorious because they should be honored to be sacrificed on the altar of the greater good. Yeah, the order, right? Again, the Imperials love talking about order. This is Star Wars, so the rebels are always the good guys, and the people that are enforcing the process are always the bad guys. But yeah,
and then we have Mayfeld, who can't take it anymore. You can see his face is changing. It's like, oh, and eventually he just pulls out his blaster and shoots Valen Hess. You're like, okay, I get it. And the bunch, of course, blows up the whole plan, and now they got to move to plan B and get out of there as fast as possible. They got to shoot more people as a result of it. So not quite the optimal way to approach the situation, Brian. But what we want to talk about here is just expanding on what we talked about in our big question to start off this episode: leadership by example, right? Being magnanimous creates this pull, even when you're dealing with this former Imperial sharpshooter who has very low morals and kind of just does what he has to get by. Even with him, we see that Din makes an impact. And it's not like Suddenly he becomes like Din and he dons the helmet and he's like, oh, I want to become a Mandalorian. He just makes one decision and then he kind of halfway steps it back by shooting the guy. But still, we see something in that.
Well, I think shooting bad guys is considered morally acceptable in the Star Wars universe, so we'll gloss over that for the moment. But yeah, what I love about this is that the Mayfeld character was carrying this intrinsic conflict around with him the whole time, right? He was in it for himself because he was dissatisfied with the state of the world. He's like, well, that's just like bad things just happen, and I had bad things happen to me in my past, and so I'm just going to take care of myself, right? And we've seen that in his actions, and it turns out that his backstory is he was an Imperial and he was involved in a situation where the Imperials did something reprehensible. And so now he doesn't believe in that organization either. So he just he logically derives like, well, there shouldn't be any rules. I shouldn't follow anybody else because nobody can be trusted. They're just out for themselves. But proximity with the Mandalorian, proximity with a leader who is, self-sacrificing and magnanimous and aligned to a higher purpose and willing to risk himself to make somebody else's life better, like just shows him a different way of thinking about the world. And so he's like, oh, well, I could do that too. Like, there's no world in which outside of this mission, Mayfeld's going to go find a way to cripple the Imperial war effort, right? There's no way he would ever put himself at risk to go do that, even though he intrinsically wants to, even though he doesn't like them and doesn't want them to succeed. There's no way he's going to take any effort to making that piece of the world better until he's put in the position of observing at close range what it looks like.
Right. Yeah, and then I think we see this often in Star Wars, right? This is a pretty common trend that by association with these great characters, others are also able to do something like by just macro, right? Darth Vader, by association with Obi-Wan and with Luke, just by nearness to those guys, is able to, in episode 6, make that final decision to overthrow the Emperor.
And this is why we see self-sacrifice as one of our other leadership superpowers, right? Is that we see this story all the time, right? And of course, this is a story. This is Star Wars. This is an episode with laser blasts and ships blowing up and, all those things, right? So it's ridiculous and it's artificial. But the reason we keep telling ourselves these stories, the reason that self-sacrifice shows up in our stories of magnanimous leaders, the reason that the character that flips from being disillusioned to being principled is such a trope is because it's a real thing. Like, I have seen this. I have been on activities where you just give a little bit of a pressure relief valve. You give people an opportunity to step outside of the process into, what do you really think we should be doing? How would you really like to contribute to this company? What would you really like to work on? And you uncover this incredible wealth of energy. You uncover this incredible wealth of dissatisfaction that can be channeled into making something new. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people be like, oh, you mean I could do something other than turn the crank? Like, I could do this other amazing thing. And it's really hard to manage that energy, but it's there. So many people are just waiting for a leader to give them permission to be more than what their job title says that they can do. Right. And if you can do that, then you can get then all the grouchy, slightly double crossing, untrustworthy, sarcastic Mayfelds of the world. Right. Like, a lot of them are just sort of waiting for somebody to give them permission to flip. Right. Give them permission to be like, oh, like, I could just go do that. You just went and did that, didn't you?